or should I say the regional room? I don't know. I have to prepare you for some Swinglish today, but I think you will understand me. Everybody in this room, I think, knows Swinglish perfectly, don't you? Yeah, I see some people nod their heads. Good. Now I want to check in with who's here today. So as usual, go into mentip.com and enter the code. I also applied the code in chat, but the code is 1296 87 75. And I can also just share my presentation so that you get the code. But we want to know which organization that you're representing, and also what are your expectations today for this seminar? I see now that the code has changed. I will give you the correct code instead. Sometimes Menti changes codes. So I will give you if you hold on for a moment. Sorry about this. Okay, the correct code is now in the chat, and I will also change it in the presentation. We got our first one from Sörmland, so now it works perfectly. Thank you. So I know that we are a lot of people here today from regions all over Sweden, and also some governments. We have Sörmland, Norrbotten, Kronoberg, Västernorrland. Formation och inspiration. I'm here to learn. Interesting perspectives on regional planning. Learn more. And hopefully you're in the right place. Kunskap om kloka Finland. More knowledge about our smart friends in Finland. Yeah, sounds good. And now we have Ilona with us as well from Helsinki Uusimaa Regional Council. Good. Now we got to know each other a little bit. Let's move on. Yeah, I'm just gonna go through the program again for you so that you know what we're gonna do today. We have an interesting program today. Some of you attended our seminar in October, which we also did with ESPON, where we got to learn more about the planning systems, how it's different between 32 different countries in Europe, and also how our neighbors in Norway are working with spatial planning on a regional level. And today we're pleased to welcome our guest from Aalto University and the region of Uusimaa in Finland. You're going to have to learn me how to pronounce it correctly later. But we're going to start today's seminar by listening to some words from Mikael Forsberg, that represents the Swedish government office. Then we have once again with us Peter Smith from Stockholm University. They're going to speak about how regional planning in Sweden has developed over time compared to other European countries, and what is the status in Sweden today. After that, we'll take a short trip over the Baltic Sea and listen to Raine and Kaisa from the Aalto University and Ilona Mansika from the region of Uusimaa to the story about how regional spatial planning in Finland has developed through the years and what is the status today in Finland. After the break, we're gonna take a break then to refill our coffee cups or to take a technical break, as we say in Sweden when we need to go to the toilet. And about 10:45, we will close the curtains for this time. And our ambition is that we will have new inspiration to take with us on our journey to improve the planning system in Sweden, this and in Finland. And this seminar is arranged in collaboration with the ESPON program, as you heard. Then I would like to welcome Mikael Forsberg from the government office up to the digital stage. Welcome, Mikael. The stage is yours.
Thank you, and good morning. Do you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you well.
Perfect. As said, my name is Mikael Forsberg, and I work at the Ministry of Rural Affairs and Infrastructure, Unit for Regional Development, and mainly with issues relating to territorial development and planning. So this seminar is really interesting and a good way to find synergies between knowledge development in different levels. And I'm also a member of the monitoring committee of ESPON, so I will just say a few words about that. ESPON is an EU-funded Interreg program consisting of all 27 member states and 4 partner states. Total budget for ESPON this period is 60 million euro, and it's a policy-oriented program which link research with policy development. And it's important for knowledge development about territorial cohesion, development planning for different government levels, both for European Union, but also public organizations in the member states. Some examples what ESPON could support you in is studies, reports, and seminars like this today, data, maps, and statistics, and it also supports cooperation in Europe between member states, regions, municipalities, and agencies with specific knowledge needs. And ESPON have national contact points in every member states, and in Sweden we have one at Tillväxtverket. So if you have a question about how ESPON could support you, or if you have some ideas about studies or knowledge needs, please contact our national contact point, Wolfgang Pichler, and you see his email address here. And also on the new ESPON website, you could also see the different themes, so-called thematic action plans, which could maybe inspire you with some ideas as well. But that's all for me, and thank you. And now I'm looking forward for today's seminar and to hear more about different examples in Nordic and practices about planning for regional development. So thank you.
Thank you for those words, Mikael. And you're going to join us for all the seminar. This is a special interest for you, I know that. Before we take a journey to our neighbors in Finland, we're going to get an overview on how regional spatial planning has developed over time in Sweden. So we are glad to have Peter Smith from Stockholm University with us once again. Give him a warm digital applaud. Welcome, Peter. The stage is yours.
Hello. Yes, thank you. Good morning, everybody. So now I try to, first of all, to share my screen with you. Does this work?
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. All right. Yes. So thank you. Yeah, well, that's the title I've gotten, Regional Spatial Planning in Sweden. And to start with, you know, as you see here, I put the word spatial in inverted commas. I mean, in principle, working for Department of Human Geography, if you see words like spatial, territorial, etc., we always like them. But for me, it feels like it's a bit dispensable. Regional planning is always spatial. But I think we get back to this later on in particular as well when we talk about Finland and later on then as well in the discussion. Yes, as Tobias mentioned, I've gotten two overarching questions. How has regional spatial planning in Sweden developed over time compared to other European countries? And what is the status in Sweden today? Well, basically, I know could talk about this for a few hours, but I've just got 15 minutes, so I will try to make it as brief as possible. Well, to start with, it's always nice to get back to John Friedman and Clyde Weaver and their sort of seminal book about the evolution of regional planning, because they said already at the end of the 1970s that regional planning has come of age. In country after country, it has become part of the established machinery of government. So that's an observation, of course, basically based on the Northern American context, but also, of course, in Europe. And the reasons, of course, why regional planning has been established in so many countries is, of course, it's sort of planning euphoria, in particular after World War II, you know, with expanding cities and of course, in particular, the car dependence, because of car dependency, the morphological and functional expansion of urban areas, but also, of course, safeguarding national interests, and of course, a sort of growth paradigm in which we were in particular in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And there was this need, apparently, to have regional planning in many European countries in particular. Yes, and taking some examples, here is the famous Greater London Plan. Of course, well, maybe the initiative is, of course, rather sad because London, as you know, was totally destroyed in 1944. But that was one of the sort of main regional plans that normally people are pointing at, which was, of course, very innovative and as such an interesting regional initiative. But also, of course, that what we know as well very much from the Swedish context, in particular when we look into city plans, that here's one leading planner or architect was behind it. I think it was even sociologist Patrick Abercrombie, as you see as well here on this picture. Well, moving on, I know I need to get very fast. I as well have to return to my home region where I come from originally, namely the Ruhr region. And there already in 1912, a guy called Robert Schmidt, not a relative to me, has written a memorandum for a spatial structure plan for the Ruhr region. And that's this heavily industrialized region in Western Germany. And the funny thing is, that is a PhD dissertation, which was which addressed in particular the chaotic traffic situation and the water management issues, but also already then the development of green wedges, and of course claiming for better coordination between these rapidly growing cities in the like Dortmund, Essen, Duisburg, etc. And it took more than 50 years. Well, there has happened a lot in between, of course. Until his main ideas actually were turned into a regional plan. And it was then in 1966, which became as well a model for other regional plans in Germany, in particular in unity with the German Planning and Building Act, which was adopted in 1965. So today we have 104 planning regions in Germany. So that's the level below the Länder level, which covers the entire country. And that is something I would like to emphasize already now, because that's, of course, not an exception. It's rather the rule across Europe that you have regional planning that covers the entire country. And Sweden is an interesting exception with only 3 regions that follow a statutory regional planning approach. Well, in the Northern European context, of course, we have to look into Denmark and the famous finger plan, which was, of course, very innovative, as you know, in particular with this idea of concentration of urban development and public transport along the fingers, and while protecting the free spaces, these wedges in between. But also, as you see as well here, it was then developed by the planning office in Copenhagen. And as you may know today, the finger plan is adopted and developed by the government. So the government is responsible for the finger plan of Greater Copenhagen. I don't know if there are ambitious here as well in Sweden, but I can't imagine that the government in Sweden would, so to speak, take the responsibility for the regional development plan of Stockholm, for instance. But anyway, there's of course various reasons for this, which are interesting to notice. Well, turning to Sweden, regional planning has not played at all a significant role in the Swedish planning history. There's a nice overview here by Carina Nilsson, who did that some years ago. Maybe we can say there's a sort of exception to some extent, because between 1972 and 1987, a sort of national state-run regional planning approach it was sort of practiced in Sweden, however, which was very much limited to the documentary and inventory work undertaken within physical national planning. So that's, again, a rather very weak approach towards regional planning. Regional policy, in particular the distribution of money, basically, was of course much more in the focus in these years than regional spatial planning, as we call it here. But then in the Planning and Building Act from 1987, then introduced rather late statutory regional planning. For Stockholm, it was already introduced earlier, but then even in 87 as well for the Gothenburg region. And now I mentioned already Stockholm, and that is, of course, there's a reason for this, because that's the only region with a long history and as well continuity in regional planning, and started already in 1936, so quite early as well. As well, I've shown you other examples from the UK, Germany, and Denmark. So quite early, already in 1936, and that was then a sort of bottom-up initiative by Stockholm City and some surrounding municipalities. And then later on in the 50s, Regional Planning Association was formed, which then took over the responsibility for regional planning. And of course, interesting to notice, and then now moving more to the current state, is of course that the regional plans, of course, have developed as well, not only in sort of responding to sort of topical challenges, but also in their character. Namely from physical land use planning, as it was the idea from the very beginning, to more strategic and comprehensive regional planning and development. And of course, the reason for this as well is that the regional development strategies, which are as well compulsory and mandatory since 2019 for all regions in Sweden, have been integrated in this plan document. So therefore, we have a sort of I would say ideal situation that the regional development plan for Stockholm has sort of unites both main issues of regional planning and development. Yeah, and so has this sort of more maybe we may say as well more defensive character in sort of land use planning, in saying, okay, suggesting what type of land use development or land use should take place and where, but also then as well opening up for regional development. So where and what should develop. Gothenburg is quite different. I don't think I have the time to go through this all. Has more sort of checkered history with its ups and downs. So there were as well some regional plans have been developed between the 1940s and 80s. And regional planning body was even established in 1988 based on the Planning and Building Act from 87. But the Gothenburg Regional Station, actually, they continue to work rather with non-statutory so-called structural images, even though they've gotten, so to speak, the sort of assignment to produce statutory regional plans, but they have never done this. And therefore, as well, in 2019, the association has lost, so to speak, its competence to produce statutory regional plans, because the claim is now that directly elected regional bodies, so-called regions, as we call them here in Sweden, regioner, have to be responsible for regional planning. So there's a discussion whether Västra Götalandsregion, so Göteborgsregionen is a part of it, should apply to become a regional planning body according to the Planning and Building Act, but this was met, as maybe many of you know, with strong resistance from many municipalities, but also sub-regional municipal associations, which are still active in Västra Götaland region, and that was then ultimately rejected. So what is then the current state of regional spatial planning in Sweden? I think in a European perspective, we always have to remember that in Sweden we have rather large municipalities in terms of surface area. Many of them are larger than planning regions in other countries. So that's something we need to keep in mind. In particular, since normally regional planning, one sort of main task of regional planning is sort of to coordinate urban-rural relations, as we call it. Yeah, and that is normally as well sort of quite well included even within many municipalities, since they are so large. Anyhow, of course, we have the other sort of challenge, of course, in Sweden, that many municipalities are rather sparsely populated, and therefore there's, of course, a need for intermunicipal coordination if you think of services of public services, services of general interest, and so on and so on. So I'm not saying that there's no need for regional planning, rather the opposite. But that's, I think, something we need to keep in mind always. So many of these municipalities are extremely large in terms of surface area, and territory matters in regional planning. Only 3 out of 21 regions, and that's very specific as well, in a European perspective, as I've noted earlier already, they actually practice, or allowed to practice, statutory regional planning. And Stockholm since 1958, Skåne quite recently, since 2019, and Halland region even more recently, since 2023. So if you see a sort of development, even though there's still 18 regions which do not practice statutory regional planning, so regional planning under the PBA, the Planning and Building. And there's certainly an ongoing discussion if more should follow. But, and that's very interesting, I think, as well in this context, all 21 regions, as you know, are responsible for regional development. And since 2019, regional development strategies have to be developed, and regions as well are responsible for the decisions on the use of certain state funds for regional growth programs. Regions are as well now responsible for regional transport infrastructure plans, and of course, in concert with municipalities, are responsible for regional public transport. So in that sense, we can say, well, there's a sort of rescaling, as we call in academia. So in other words, that towards regions, so regions have gotten a sort of more responsibilities here in Sweden. And that is, of course, interesting to note, as, of course, classically Sweden is associated with a strong local autonomy, and with local, I mean here in particular municipal autonomy. Well, but anyway, due to this sort of dual life of regional planning and regional development, we can say that they are very often thematically divided, they're institutionally divided, and they're organizationally divided. And they've even, as some observers used to say, have developed parallel communities of practice. And therefore, of course, the regional spatial planning context. So if we now say that regional spatial planning is a sort of in particular to make this bridge between regional planning and regional development, as for instance being practiced here in Stockholm, we can say that if you look at the entire country, this context is extremely heterogeneous, but also, of course, very dynamic because a lot is happening. But also, of course, it's contested because of strong municipal autonomy, as I mentioned already. So it's a sort of a lot of resistance as well here in this country, maybe more as well in many other European countries, which I know. There's as well sort of a weak political backing very often for regional planning, for regional spatial planning. Then, of course, we have this issue of questionable geographies. Because the current regions don't necessarily coincide with functional territories. And here I would like to make as well a link to an ongoing ESPON project on non-standard regions, NOSTA-GEO. But also another sort of what I see as a sort of big challenge is that regional development strategies are generally spatially blind. So if you read through them, there are no considerations about actually how territory matters. So how the specific territory, or how the territorial specificities in each region, to what extent they really matter, and we have tremendous differences as well across these regions, as we know, in terms of urbanization, for instance, in terms of infrastructural development, but also, of course, many other sort of issues of land use. But also, they do not say anything about where what should actually be developed. Yes, these are regional development strategies, so place does not matter. Some extents, on the other hand, and that's what I meant as well, that the regional spatial planning context is quite dynamic here in Sweden, that we see as well a lot of attempts to bridge these dilemmas of regional spatial planning in Sweden in recent years. So we can say that regional spatial planning in Sweden is a sort of policy field for experimentation. We see, of course, a growing interest in strengthening the physical planning perspective, as well as regional growth work, mainly in relation to municipal comprehensive planning, but also issues of housing provision, of course, public transport, infrastructure planning, and so on and so on. So we can see as well that in some 18 regions practice some, but very different forms of non-statutory regional planning. So they do that on a voluntary basis. For those regions which are not Halland, Skåne, and Stockholm. Yes, and a former master student, Hilda Bergqvist Andersson, she looked in her master thesis into 3 of those regions which practice what we call non-statutory regional planning on a voluntary basis. So they try to sort of integrate the spatial perspective to some extent in their work, so to speak. And we could here sort of identify different logics. I don't have the time to go through this, but yeah, we can say that Blekinge in particular and Östergötland are quite active in that, and Västergötland region maybe more, as we call it here, distant, because they sort of tried in an extremely sort of implicit soft way. So the other 2 regions are a bit more outspoken, so to speak. They really try to, with help of informal networks, educational actions, they try to be sort of in various ways to support, in particular, municipal planning. Yes. So yes, and I don't know. I'm certainly running out of time. But maybe my final slide for today is that one, and that's as well based on another ESPON project we have worked with some years ago. The Compass project, and there we have to compare different planning systems across Europe. But in this specific sort of sub-study, my colleague and me, we have looked into regional planning in 8 different countries. And as you see here, we have placed Sweden here in the left-hand corner, which means that that we haven't seen in Sweden in the last in the time period 2000 to 2015, no changes in formal regional planning spaces, similar to Germany and Norway. In other words, this sort of geography of regional planning has not been touched. The same as Hungary, but we see, for instance, that in 4 other countries, there have been changes. So like Ireland, France, Italy, and Poland. But also we looked into changes in the formal organizational structure for regional planning. And here, apart from that the 2 more regions have gotten this sort of statutory status to practice regional planning, namely Halland and Skåne in the meantime, there have no really been real changes to formal or statutory regional planning in Sweden, similar as well in Germany and Norway, for instance. But also this figure as well informs a bit as well about the regional planning instruments. And here, for instance, the regional plan, according to the Planning and Building Act, is more classified here as being strategic, but also, of course, a framework for municipal plans, which is sort of quite common characteristic of regional plan instruments. But we see as well that, for instance, some other regional plans, for instance, in Norway, in Germany, but also in Hungary, France, Italy, and Poland, they have as well this regulatory character, which is I think quite interesting as well to notice. So meaning that as well, regional plans unfold sort of binding quality towards municipal plans in particular. I have one more slide. I don't know, should I stop or?
You can just summarize it and quite quickly, and then we'll continue.
Yeah. Okay. I go through the 3 more points. So what is so specific with statutory regional planning in Sweden? To sum up this part, we can say that, of course, the regional plan as such is a rather sort of, if I may say so, weak instrument, because it only specifies the basic features for the use of land and water areas. So in other words, the catalog of what regional plan instruments need to do and should do is normally much longer in many other countries. So we have a very sort of lean approach here in Sweden. Also, of course, regional plans are non-binding. They're just strategic indicative for municipal comprehensive plans and detailed plans and area regulations. So this is, as well as I've wanted to show you on the other slide, rather, well, not necessarily the rule, maybe as well rather sort of an exception. But also, of course, there's of course a strong need to practice regional planning proactively within the given soft legal framework. And based on some empirical research that we did here in Stockholm in the last 2 years, we can say that the regional planning agency, so talking about more about the practice and the work of regional planning, it's quite important here, because they need to be very creative and active, and as we are calling it here, it's the nucleus of cultivating regional planning, which is of course controlled and guided by boards and committees, regional politicians, but there needs constantly to redefine their role, and they're in principle as well forced, as we call it here, to experiment with new normative concepts. Like this idea, for instance, of regionala stadskärnor, or landsbygdsnoddar, for instance. So regional urban cores and rural nodes and those concepts that they have introduced in Stockholm in the last year. So there's a need for this sort of creativity and agility, I would say, which is very clear and interesting to notice, in particular as well, compared to other countries. Okay, I leave it like that, and some And of course, as you know, these slides will be as well made available for you. So there are some more links as well, if you are interested to dive further into that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. I think this presentation about the Swedish timeline compared to other countries is good to have in mind when we listen to the Finnish example. And I think we can be a little bit flexible about the program today. So Raine and Ilona and Kaisa, don't be stressed about the time. You have all the time you need for your presentation as well, and we will be flexible about the whole program. Thank you, Peter. Now we're gonna take our trip over the Baltic Sea and talk to our Finnish friends. Welcome, Raine, Ilona, and Kaisa. So glad to have you with us. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much.
I'm just gonna say, if you have any questions for the presentation that Peter had, just write it in the chat or save it for the panel discussion later. Okay. Welcome, Raine.
Yes. Hopefully you can see my slides.
Perfect.
Very good. Yes, I will first shortly present the land use planning system in Finland, which I suppose is not that different from Sweden, but maybe regarding the regional planning level, there are interesting differences and maybe tendencies as well, and we can discuss those in the panel. But after this short introduction to our planning system, Ilona will discuss about the development and status quo of regional planning in Finland, with the view especially on the Uusimaa region, which is where the capital Helsinki is also located, and then I will continue with the major city regions, city regional planning and agreement policy, which we call MAL policy. I'll return to that acronym later, and after myself, Kaisa will end by bringing certain perspective, especially from her experience in the Ministry of Environment, being a party in these MAL agreements of our major city regions. Kaisa is presently postdoc researcher in Aalto University in my team. So we also belong to the so-called comprehensive integrated planning approach, besides other Nordic countries, Germany and the Netherlands and some other countries in the rather Northern Europe, where there is considerable reliance on regional planning and public sector investment, and we have quite a systematic and formal hierarchy of plans coordinating public sector activity across the different sectors of the public sector. And local authorities play an increasingly dominant role. So we have, as you have in Sweden, quite a strong local self-governance. And we have the municipal monopoly in land use planning. So we have the right to decide and make plans within our own territories in the local governments, and also in Finland the urbanization has developed rather late, and we have a traditionally strong status of private land ownership. During the Swedish era, we had these so-called crown lands provided by the Swedish king to certain cities that were established towards the turn of the 19th century. So most of them have quite a strong land policy. But then many other cities municipalities were established later on, and they have a scarcity of publicly owned land, and their land policy cultures may be quite different and more kind of private land ownership oriented than those older cities that started with the crown lands that they were provided to their ownership. We have still the Land Use and Building Act in force, maybe not any longer in next year. The reform is being prepared and has been so for many years. But the present Land Use and Building Act that came into force in the year 2000, there is the sustainable development and favorable living environment main objective there, probably in the new act as well, and the other major aim of the act, our planning act, is the interactive planning process, participatory procedures, quality of planning, the strong role of planning expertise, and an open provision of information. So local authorities, we still have 308 municipalities in Finland. Some are very small, some are quite large as Helsinki, and many in between. So the responsibility of land use planning and its implementation lies heavily on these local authorities that are in very different positions regarding their size and in terms of population and also geographical coverage. And then we have these regional councils that are not directly elected, but they are joint municipal authorities. So after the municipal elections, the municipalities in the region elect their own representatives to the regional council, which also means that the local perspective more or less dominates also in discussing the regional issues. Then the state authorities, the Ministry of Environment, it has a general guiding, legislative and informative role, and we still have these regional state-based centers for economic development, transport and the environment that no longer guide but give assistance and expertise to local planning, but this may change also whether we have these regional state agencies in the future as well, and in what form. And here we have the hierarchical planning system. We have the national land use guidelines actually guiding all levels of planning. We don't have a national plan, but interestingly, very recently, the National Transport System Plan was introduced in the reform of our Act on Transport and Roads. So we have that transport system plans at the national level in place, but although introduced by the government, it is not really much followed by the government in terms of where the road and transport infrastructure investments go. So that might be a response to the notion of Finland being klug. So here we have some bullet points on what are the issues that the national verbal guidelines kind of try to guide in the lower levels of planning: hierarchy, functioning communities and sustainable traffic, efficient transport systems, healthy and safe environment, viable natural and cultural environment and natural resources, and energy supply capable of renewal. And then the regional plan is initiated and drawn up and also approved and ratified by the regional council. That is rather recent change to the Planning Act, it's no longer ratified by the state, but they ratify them, the regional plans by themselves. And that goes to regarding the powers of the local government, also to the local master plan and the local detailed plan that has to follow the local master plan. Both are initiated, drawn up and approved by the local authority, and regional land use plan steers the local master plan, which in turn steers the local detailed plan, and they are basically all legally guiding plans. There might be some exceptions regarding the local master plan. It doesn't necessarily have to be legally binding, but in many cases it is, and it can be ratified as such. Right, okay. I will stop sharing this presentation and give the floor, so to speak, to Ilon.
Thank you. Do you hear me, colleagues?
Yes.
Yes, great. I try to share also. Wait a moment. So nice to meet you all. I am Ilona Mansikka. I'm an architect and planner, and I act as a regional planning manager in Helsinki-Uusimaa region, which is as Raine mentioned, so it's the capital region of Finland. And I must say that I have been doing a lot of benchmarking work together with Swedish colleagues in Stockholm region. So for instance, last October, we were there and giving a kind of peer review points to the new roofs of Sweden. I mean Stockholm region. So it's a really nice continuation to be here with you all. And I'm trying to get this to this mode of presentation, but takes some time. But anyways, here. So this picture is from Helsinki, the capital of Finland, and here you see some facts about our region. So we are the metropolitan region, and it's called Helsinki-Uusimaa region, and we consist of 26 very different municipalities. And here you see also the kind of sub-regions of our big region. So we have the Helsinki region in the middle, which consists of 40 municipalities, and these are the municipalities where the MAL plan that Raine was mentioning is made, and also the agreement. And then in the middle, so we have our core municipalities, so-called Helsinki metropolitan area, Helsinki, Espoo, Vantaa, and Kauniainen cities. And in the middle, we have the kind of our crown diamond, the city of Helsinki, the capital. And as you understand, so we have a lot of kind of tensions also in our region, because we have really powerful capital in our region. We have really powerful capital area, so-called Helsinki metropolitan area. And then we have the frame municipalities, so-called Helsinki region, and then we still have eastern and western municipalities, which are much smaller, 6 and 6 on east and west, and they are much smaller in resources, in population, in amount of jobs, and so on. So this all gives us a lot of tensions in our area. And here you see the kind of planning system in Finland, as Raine was already describing, and high there we have the national planning guidelines, and they are only text, as Raine told. And then we have the kind of planning system here under. So we have in the level of this aeroplane, so let's say so we have the regional land use plan, which is legally binding, giving the kind of big lines. So we have, you see this big pencil, this big paintbrush there. And under that, so this regional land use plan is legally binding and steering the municipality planning. And then we have there the eagle one. So let's say it's the general land use plan level inside of the municipalities. And then it's steering the detailed land use plan, so let's say town plans, and these all lead to permits and construction. And we say that regional land use plan is like a rope. It's not kind of forcing anybody to do anything, but it's more like creating possibilities. So as with the rope, you can draw things next to you, but you can't like push things to happen. So that's why. And of course, we have more and more, as you in Sweden. So we have the EU legislation that is giving more and more kind of framework to things that we are doing in planning. And this beautiful system, as you see it here, so it's changing very much now. This year, when we have the Land Use Act revision going on, and actually just at the moment we have the possibility to give our opinions to this new ideas of our new government, or not so new, but current government's ideas how the land use planning system should be changed. And a little bit more, I tell a little bit more about it later. But about the regional plan, still about the status and position, as you were interested about that. So as Raine was mentioning, so it's legally binding, but it's only supposed to deal with matters of national or regional significance. So we are not supposed to go and say very precisely what to do in one municipality issues, and it's giving guidelines for more detailed planning in the municipalities, sorry. And still some points about the regional plan position. So we see in Finland that the transmission of this national and regional land use needs and goals, so they need kind of regional planning level to be concretizing it to this municipality planning. And the point is that we don't want to unnecessarily restrict municipality planning solutions in matters that are not in the high level, so not in the national or regional level. And of course, about the flexibility, so that's really needed, especially in our region, in Helsinki-Uusimaa region, because we have a lot of things happening all the time. So we have the biggest population growth in our area, and also a lot of just building is happening in our area. So we really need to be more flexible on general level than maybe in some other smaller regions in Finland. Yes, this is the kind of picture of our everyday participation and interaction framework in our area. So these levels are also seen here. So on the right-hand side, you see the kind of land use planning levels as I was showing in the last picture. But on the left, you see also this kind of regional cooperation bodies and levels. So the green level up is the state of Finland level. So there we have the ministries, of course. Then the pink level, it's about our region, Helsinki-Uusimaa, but we are not working there alone, but as a regional council, but we have our good colleagues in state regional administration there, as Raine was mentioning, this ELY and AVI, for instance. And then we have kind of sub-regions in our region inside of our 26 municipalities area. So we have smaller regions. We have Helsinki region in the middle, but then we have other regions like Lohja and Raasepori, for instance, in the western Uusimaa. And inside of Helsinki region, which is our capital region, so it's more complicated organization than the other ones. So we have different bodies there. We have, for instance, one regional body about the environment, and also another one for the public transportation, for instance. And then, of course, very important part of that level's cooperation is the voluntary cooperation work of MAL work, these 14 municipalities. And inside, of course, of all these levels, we have the kind of unique and separated municipalities. So we have altogether 26, and then, for instance, in Helsinki region, we have 40 municipalities. And this actually, I made this picture with my colleague Sirkku Huisko when I started to work in our council 13 years ago, long time ago, because it was really complicated for me as I started to understand this kind of framework of cooperation where we were working. And of course, to work there effectively, you need to understand the kind of role of each level that you work with. Here, still a picture about the roles of MAL, so this kind of voluntary regional planning process, which is on the left, this green triangle about MAL plan and agreement. And then to the right, you see our regional plan, which is this kind of legally binding part of this regional planning. So we see that in this regional level, so these both plans have clearly their own roles and meaning and need for them. So, and we see that these two processes are complementing each other. Instead of competing with each other. So, which is also sometimes in the history, we have seen this kind of more kind of competitive moments. Well, about the regional plan in Finland and in Uusimaa, so the point is that we have the tasks and we guide the structure of the region and the major lines of land use, such as transport network, location and extent of urban areas. Of course, these are kind of most important parts, the kind of big elements, and of course the green areas as well. But then we have some specialities in Finland, like for instance, we have to do steering of this kind of large concentrations of trade, so-called shopping malls. This is a kind of special detail that is maybe going away now when we have the revision of our Land Use and Planning Act. Okay, about the regional plan, so we more like decide the major land use policies of entire region or several municipalities. And the point is that we are not dealing with the kind of one municipality issues, as I told you before. And also about the perspective, so the idea is the regional plan looks far into the future, up to the 30 years maybe in the future. And also the main task is kind of put together the national and regional interests with the local goals. So this is the kind of very challenging position, and we can say that we are in the middle of, how do you say, the trunk and the tree, or how do you say, at least in Finnish. Here are some challenges that, as I told you, that we are from the metropolitan region, Helsinki-Uusimaa region. So this is a picture I made for Metrex conference, maybe already 6 years ago or something. I just wanted to show to you. So many of the challenges in regional planning are the same as you have, especially in the metropolitan region in Stockholm, but also in Sweden in general, I'm sure, and also in Finland in general, of course, like this weakening biodiversity, energy revolution, climate change issues, and so on. But of course, we have some special issues also in Finland, and especially in our region. So for instance, we are talking about affordable housing in our area. And this is something that the MAL planning and agreement was originally meant for, to offer this affordable housing, enough housing to our metropolitan area. And of course, some of these challenges are kind of positive ones. For instance, this stronger sense of communality and need for participation. So actually, I think that is it's a positive challenge, but of course it means that we need more resources for participation in the regional planning process, for instance. And then especially in our area, but always, I mean, all around Finland, we have the polarization issue. So we have very different municipalities, we have very different areas, resources, values, and lifestyles. And this is also a really kind of well, difficult challenge in our regional planning process. Here a kind of case picture example of our area. So our in force, our regional plan, which is in force at the moment. So Helsinki-Uusimaa Regional Land Use Plan 2050, and it consists of 3 legally binding sub-regional plans. As you see here, Western Uusimaa in the left, and then Helsinki region in the middle, and on the right we have Eastern Uusimaa. And Helsinki region in the middle is the one that is also making this voluntary MAL plan. Here about our common current situation in our regional council. So we are seeing, of course, around us that our operating environment is changing all the time. What we can do with our tools, that's what we have been discussing. The changes are different. We have war in Ukraine, we have NATO membership, energy crisis, we have nature loss. Of course, the climate crisis all around us. We have needs for circular economy, green transition, energy transition. Of course, we have more and more the effects of EU regulation. For instance, one case is this national implementation of the restoration regulation. Maybe I think you have the same in Sweden. Then we have also the changes in our national legislation, including the Land Use Act revision this year. And how we want to respond by our tools, so by updating the regional program and the regional plan, as well as all the time collecting information and monitoring, and also advocating the interests of our area and municipalities in different ways. And we have started a new green transition regional plan called Vision 2050, and it's underway, and we are just doing the draft at the moment. Yes, Peter was showing very nice history of development of regional land use plans in Sweden, and this is very general kind of the same thing. So the development of regional land use planning in Finland from 1940s to the present. I'm not going to through this, but I will send these slides to you. So just in the big lines, so we have the voluntary association activities type of activities in 1940s and 50s, and then 1955 we had the new Building Act, which gave the kind of legal status to the regional plans, and after that we have had different regional councils in our area. So and at the moment we have the big regional council, which consists of 26 municipalities, and maybe about the differences in the kind of subjects of the regional plans during the years. So maybe we can say that maybe in 1980s the kind of sustainable development came as a goal to our regional planning around Finland, and it's connected to this that Ministry of Environment was founded 1984. And then we had the kind of new Land Use and Building Act at 2000, as Raine was showing, and that's the one that has been kind of steering all these regional plans in this century. And we can say that in general, regional plans in Finland, but especially in Helsinki-Uusimaa, they have become more strategic and flexible. And the kind of themes that are coming up now, so of course they are the climate change, mitigation, adaptation, the green transition, and biodiversity conservation. These are the kind of strong themes at the moment. Yes, but let's move forward. And then I was listing some points about what affects to the position and role of the regional plan, and these were also partly in Raine's presentation, but first of all, we have to remember that we have the politically elected decision makers that guide our regional planning. So it means that the changes in politics and values, they affect a lot in our planning decisions. And this is sometimes a difficult thing to kind of understand and to remember that even we make as wonderful goals and good, we produce good information and reports, but anyways, we have the politically elected decision makers that can change everything. So that's a kind of fact. There are some other details. I'm not going to them very deeply, but for instance, there has been many revisions in our legislation, and those have changed, of course, the details of regional planning, but actually not the position. But maybe at the moment we have the new revision of Land Use Act, and this will maybe change also the kind of position of the regional plans, and that's about the weakening of the status of our planning level. In the end, we have here some opportunities with green and kind of challenges with red of our regional planning level. That's my personal opinion here. So I think as opportunities that the regional plan is one tool for regional development, and it's maybe not always remembered, but it can have a significant position in the kind of, for instance, in the location of the green transition projects. Then we have to remember that we enable simultaneous examination of this kind of very large working area, which is very important. Then we have the possibility to offer a platform for discussion in regional issues, which is also important. And we have a possibility to form a common will of the region, because we have a really extensive interaction and participation needs or from the legislation. Then some challenges that we always have to balance between different municipal interests, and that's really difficult in the kind of areas we have. So we have really strong core, and then we have weaker edge in our region. Then we have the weakness that we don't have a lot of resources, not like in Sweden, where you have the taxation also in the regional level, but we don't have it. So we don't have a lot of money, so to say. So that's why it's so important to kind of promote the implementation of the plan, for instance, in the municipality planning. And then, of course, the challenge is to keep the regional plan up to date, because it's so big kind of boat that it takes a long time to go forward. So it takes at least 8 years maybe when we start, and then when the plan is legally binding. So that's why we really need flexibility in our regional planning, especially in our region. Then one point is that the position of regional planning is not recognized. As Peter was saying, that there is certain kind of blindness in this kind of spatial perspective. So it's the same in Finland, that it's not understood really what kind of tool is that and what kind of opportunities it could have. And of course, in the end, so we have both challenges and opportunities now when our operating environment is changing so fast. But hey, thank you, and sorry if I took a too long time. Thanks.
So very interesting, Ilona. I think the next speaker is it you again, Raine?
Yes, I will.
I can just mention that you can continue your presentation, and then we'll take a little bit shorter break after your presentations before we take the questions. So just continue with your plan.
Thank you very much. Yeah, maybe I will overstep my time limit as well. I'm sorry for that already beforehand, but you can stop me as well if I take too long time. Yes, about this MAL planning and MAL policy, what on earth is it? So it comes from three first letters in Finnish language. M stands for land use, and A for housing, and L for transport. So it concerns our biggest city regions, where the city region municipalities are encouraged by the central government to collaborate on land use, housing and transport issues. And there is an established MAL policy that we have had since the year 2010. But it's still informal, it's not law-based so far. It's not a certain model, it's rather a discourse, and it's operationalized by certain this kind of informal or soft governance tools. Firstly, we have the structural schemes that city region municipalities have been drafting already prior to 2010, but it was kind of enforced in the temporary 5-year Paras Act, which required 17 largest city regions to compile jointly strategic plans towards functional and sustainable urban structure or city regional structure, integrating land use, housing and transport. So the idea was introduced firstly there. Paras Act means that the act on restructuring municipal structure and services, and they tried to drastically reduce the number of municipalities with this act, not enforcing but through encouraging municipalities to merge. There was some success. There are 140 municipalities less than we had prior to the act, but still way too many municipalities to kind of successfully handle their all sorts of vast municipal service issues and land use planning issues as well. So MAL agreements are the other policy tool. Agreements between the state and the city region municipalities, 2 ministries from the state, the Ministry of Environment and the Ministry of Transport and Communications. Some state agencies are usually involved in those agreements as well, in various ways in different regions. Also, the regional councils have been involved in drafting these MAL agreements. So nowadays, since 2020, it covers 12 years, so kind of a mid-term perspective, where it is revised every 4 years. So originally they were drafted only for 4 years, but now they have a longer time perspective. But they still check and update the MAL agreement in 4-year cycles, and it is supposed to, these agreements on investments, especially on transport and policy measures, it is supposed to be based on these city regional structural schemes. And since 2020, it has also been broadened. It originally covered only 4 largest city regions: Helsinki metropolitan region, Tampere region, Turku region, and Oulu region. Now 3 further city regions are included that have the population of the central city over 100,000. So Lahti, Kuopio, and Jyväskylä are also included in this MAL agreement policy, and the state is encouraging the municipalities to collaborate towards more functioning and sustainable city region planning and policy making by incentivizing its transport infra investments, for example, in light rail projects, terminals, upgradings of the road infrastructure, and so on. So it is kind of a carrot for encouraging municipalities to collaborate in terms of providing and preparing these structural schemes. Okay, now my slides are not moving. Okay. So the background is already it stems to 1995 in the Helsinki metropolitan area, where the state encouraged the 4 municipalities of Helsinki metropolitan area to collaborate in transport system planning, and it channeled its the state channeled its transport infra investments in this metropolitan area through this kind of transport agreement for the metropolitan area, and it subsidized its investments through this agreement. So in transport system planning, this was already in place in 95, and then towards the end of the 2000, then a similar policy was introduced in the metropolitan area regarding housing policy issues, because the overheated housing market became a problem in terms of insufficiency of affordable housing and publicly subsidized housing. So now covering the 14 municipalities of Helsinki metropolitan region, the state introduced a similar kind of housing agreement policy to commit the 40 municipalities to provide a sufficient number of plots and subsidized housing to make the housing market more functionable to the working class people with less income. And these were put together, so to speak, since 2010 with this 4-year MAL agreement, where the land use issues were brought together with housing policy and transport system planning with these 4 largest city regions. And there's the same year also this kind of loose network of city regions, regional councils, ministries, etc., now covering 18 city regions. This so-called MAL network was established to exchange learnings between the city regions, regional councils, and the state on good policies in terms of these MAL issues, hosting seminars and workshops and co-financing projects related to this thematic and so on. And these structural schemes, here we can see these different kind of strategic plans, which have a kind of a cloudy language in relation to the formal statutory plans that we have. And it has kind of emerged kind of as a new layer alongside the statutory land use planning system, somewhere in between the territorial local plans and territorial regional plans. We have this kind of a soft city regional planning tools that try to kind of capture the strategic issues of those city regions, and it has taken interesting forms in terms of plan maps and certain innovations there too. But it is a kind of a new informal layer besides this statutory system that we have, that I first introduced this kind of 3-level hierarchical planning system. Now we have this new layer kind of existing alongside this statutory, territorially based hierarchical planning system and this 2-tier government that we have with this new idea of city region. It has kind of emerged as a cuckoo's egg into the nest of the hierarchical governance and planning system that we still have in place, and in many cases it's kind of confusing and introduces institutional ambiguity. But as Ilona said, in Uusimaa region they have also, by compartmentalizing regional plans into these sub-regional plans, having a separate regional plan for Helsinki metropolitan region, it kind of is an attempt to harmonize the coexistence of this informal city regional plan and the existing territorial regional plan, and then the local local strong plans. I will not go through the Helsinki Metropolitan MAL plan and agreement. The structural scheme is called the MAL plan in Helsinki Metropolitan area. But shortly about the motives behind this so-called MAL policy. The state has had for 30 years the view that the major urban regions provide kind of engines for economic growth for the whole country, and kind of good city regional planning should be supported there so that these city regions can emerge as such engines of growth, providing welfare for the whole country. So the focus has been on the strategic planning of the whole city region. And then the concern for the regionalization of urban structures beyond the central city boundaries. This has been an issue since the 1990s as well, that these functional urban regions are in the major city regions, they are much broader than the territorial boundaries of the central cities. They have to be somehow dealt in broader manner than just by the central city itself. And so the focus then has been on the improvement of city regional urban infrastructure by coordinating land use, housing, transport, and also service and economic development planning. And then also the realization that planning sectors have become rather siloed, and this MAL policy is trying to improve interaction and coordination between the different planning sectors, especially between transport and land use planning. And it has been to a degree successful, as they have been kind of learning this collaboration for 50 years already. And then the issue when the municipalities have the right to levy taxes from its residents and enterprises, I guess a similar phenomenon as in Sweden, that it easily leads to this kind of zero-sum competition over investments and well-to-do residents, the so-called good taxpayers, between the municipalities within the city region. And this is the kind of major counterforce for this city regional collaboration. When these municipalities are strong politically as well, and the regional councils are kind of conglomerations of representatives of these local politicians, then it easily resorts to this kind of competition between municipalities instead of well-organized strategic collaboration. So that is why the state has tried to directly intervene with this competitive status of city region municipalities, providing its incentives in transport as a carrot to encourage the municipalities to collaborate, despite of these tax incomes being distributed maybe in uneven ways between the municipalities, to provide a kind of counterforce for this intermunicipal zero-sum competition in the city regions. But there are certain challenges. It is still rather incremental and very project-centered, very much centered on these transport projects that the state promises to incentivize in these MAL agreement policy. So there are strategic and broader perspectives still needed. There is a gap between administration and politics. Planners cooperate usually well, but the politicians are not really committed, and often they don't even very well understand what is going on in these MAL policy issues. And this also leads to some kind of depoliticization, technocratization of city regional strategy work between the administrators, both in state and municipal level. So there is also a question of legitimacy of this kind of administrator-driven soft city regional planning. But in future, the scarcity of the state is an issue. We have an increasing national debt, and how long will the state have these carrots of incentives to transport to offer? How long can this MAL agreement policy continue if the money is being reduced to work with from the state? Peri-urbanization, so the urbanization is going even beyond these city regional boundaries nowadays. So how to bring those? The functional urban regions, so to speak, are getting broader and broader. How to bring these broader areas into this policy policy practice. And there is a lack of good boundary crossing concepts or artifacts, narratives, and models still, how to coordinate through these shared boundary objects, this kind of city regional planning. So I think we are in need of certain innovations in how to do such planning and policy jointly and how to coordinate better still. And there's this institutional ambiguity that I mentioned, which is a challenge to harmonize, and then what we are up against or looking forward to is the government proposal for this Land Use Act reform that Ilon also mentioned. The intention is to make this city regional collaboration, land use, housing and transport obligatory in the reformed act. So it will no longer then be this kind of informal collaboration or soft collaboration, but actually law-based collaboration in one form or another for these 7 major city regions. Regional planning would be limited to land use issues of regional significance only, but not of sub-regional significance, like many issues regarding this MAL policy are kind of issues of sub-regional significance. So the state wants to remove the regional authority from these city regional issues to the broader regional issues. Okay, so in that sense, there is a tendency of weakening the status of regional planning in Finland. But okay, I now leave the floor to Kaisa. If we still have the time. What do you think, Tobias?
Yes, of course we want to hear Kaisa as well, and then we have some interesting questions in the chat, and the floor is yours, Kaisa, and then we'll take some questions. I think maybe we have to go to get through this without the break, so that we have time to answer and talk about these issues, because I think there's a lot of people there sitting on interesting questions for you. Go ahead, Kaisa.
Okay, I go very swiftly through this, just to add some practical or experiences from the practice to Raine's excellent presentation about the MAL agreement policy in the major Finnish city regions. I'm drawing from my experiences from the Ministry of Environment, where I worked last year as a government official who was responsible for coordinating the preparation of the MAL agreements for 2024-31 round. So here are some successes and challenges from the practice point of view with the MAL agreement policy. So first, let's go through the main successes. Well, Finnish government has many partnership-based policy tools with municipalities and with the city regions. However, MAL agreement policy has been highly appreciated by the city regions, but also by different government agencies because of its capacity to actually deliver concrete outputs in the urban environment. So other partnership-based policy tools in urban policy are maybe less intangible, and there is no funding tied to them. So this instrument gives a concrete ability to actually do something in the urban environment. And in the 2 previous MAL contract rounds or agreement rounds, the government funding has been around 1 billion euro. Of course, it's allocated for the 7 city regions, and the city regions are not generally happy with the amount of funding received, and at least Helsinki city region in the last round made a study that in Sweden there is much more funding, government funding for city regional sustainable infrastructure projects. So of course, like it looks like a big number, but of course it depends on the country, like what kind of funding is allocated through what mechanism. So it's a highly appreciated and liked policy tool by the city regions and the government. And one of the major successes with the MAL agreement policy has been that it has intensified the cooperation between the municipalities in the major city regions. This is especially visible in the 3 newer MAL city regions, the mid-size and smaller regions of Kuopio, Jyväskylä, and Lahti, which joined the agreement policy only 3 years ago. So in 3 years, the city regional cooperation on this urban and transport and housing planning issues has intensified, and there is like this new kind of culture of doing that the MAL agreement policy has encouraged. And it has encouraged the municipalities to develop city regional plans. Raine told about the layered policy, but these city regional plans, there has been some in some city regions they have developed them already before, but they're kind of like in order to be eligible for the MAL contracts or the agreements, the city regions need to have the city regional plans in place. So that is actually like quite a good carrot for the city regions to do the city regional plans. Or now, as Raine said, from now on, it is very likely that the city regional cooperation will be mandated by the law, but before, when it was voluntary. So this instrument of the carrot of the government funding has been a good tool for encouraging the municipalities to cooperate. And I will later show you that there has been some indication that the city regional plans and the MAL contract policy, which is tied to them, has improved the conditions for sustainable growth in the city regions. And maybe the last of the main achievements has been that the MAL agreement policy has become quite an efficient tool to deliver large infrastructure projects in the city regions, which are supporting sustainable accessibility. And here, of course, it depends from country to country, but in Finland, in the MAL contracts, the large transport infrastructure projects, there is part of them is funded by the municipalities and part of them is funded by the government. So, and with this model, it has become quite an efficient platform to deliver and to select these projects based on the city regional needs. Ilona made a great good presentation about Uusimaa region, but in the other other city regions of Finland, MAL agreement policy and the city regional planning has had quite significant positive impacts taken together. Of course, there are many factors affecting these things, but I would like to believe that in Tampere city region, the city regional planning together with the government funding instrument or the funding through MAL contracts has been quite a significant factor boosting the economic and population growth and in a sustainable manner. Behind this has been what is on the up right corner, the structural plan for Tampere city region, which is directing to main urban development alongside the tram arteries. And then there is the MAL contract, which has provided funding for building the tram. So before this funding from MAL contracts, there was no tram line in Tampere. The public transport was based on bus. So this, they planned the city region so that the transport system will be based on the tram, and then the government provided funding for that through the MAL contracts, and together this enabled to building and changing the transport system so that it would support better sustainable urban growth. And this has been a very significant factor which has boosted the growth and popularity of Tampere city region. So I think this is one of the very good examples what can be achieved with the city regional planning and the contractual policy together. As I said, it has been very efficient delivery mechanism for the sustainable transport projects. Tampere tram is not the only one, but there is also city regional tram line now built in Helsinki city region. There is also improvement of the rail track projects, some road infrastructure projects as well as some smaller projects which are quite minor in terms of funding, but very important, for example, for developing the cycling infrastructure in the municipalities of the city regions. And maybe one of the significant successes with the policies is that the housing production has increased. There is on the right side, there is the figure from the Helsinki city region. So one of the when the MAL policy started some 15 years ago, there was a shortage of housing in Helsinki city regions, which was blocking its growth to a certain extent. But with the MAL agreement policy, where the volume of or the housing production targets are one of the key elements that the city regions need to provide in order to get the government funding for the infrastructure projects. Like it has boosted the volume of housing production, and the situation nowadays with the housing supply is quite different in Helsinki city region in comparison to 2008 when the first contract was made with the city region. Also, the urban structure in the city regions has become generally more compact. However, these are the general developments, not happening in all of the 7 city regions. So we cannot say that this city regional planning and MAL agreements have been together only a success story, but there is an indication that the development is going to the right direction in this sense. The reduction of CO2 emissions of traffic has been slow, and maybe this is something that the MAL agreements together with the city regional planning have not quite achieved as intended. Of course, it's again an issue with many affecting factors, and together these two policy tools have not been successful enough in reducing the CO2 emissions. But in general, there are quite good results from the MAL agreements and the city regional planning. But of course, there are also some challenges from the government perspective and from the perspective of the city regions. Maybe the primary challenge is that MAL agreements are not jurisdically contracts, but they are more of these letters of intent, which means that they are not binding. And they are also quite short-term contracts, so they are updated for each government's term. What this means is that each government can leave their own fingerprints in the contracts. Now, when there has been the aim to increase the long-term kind of the long-term perspective and strategic perspective of the MAL contracts by agreeing on the 12-year goals for MAL agreements, it might lead to a situation in which the government has quite different objectives than are the objectives of the MAL contracts. And what this may cause is that, for example, in this MAL planning round, the funding to MAL projects was not given those traditional kind of the projects that were implementing the MAL agreement goals. So there might be this kind of mismatch between what the current government wants and what the MAL contracts should deliver. And this is, of course, from the perspective of the city regions, quite a harmful situation because they would like to see continuation and the long-term perspective for getting funding for a certain type of development. Also, what happened in this MAL contract round was that the government had quite a different take on the housing policy on this round than has been the goals of the MAL agreement. As Ilona said previously, one of the main thing with the MAL contracts, in addition to the housing production targets, has been the delivery of affordable housing, where the national government has subsidized the housing. But now the current government is not in favor of that kind of subsidized development and has terminated some of the housing policy tool. So now there are not actually the means in the MAL contracts to deliver to MAL contract targets. So there are these kind of tendencies because of the 4-year government cycle of updating to MAL contracts and the 12-year longer-term traditional MAL agreement goals. So this is from the government's perspective, bit of a difficult situation, and of course, because they are updated every 4 years, they are also tied to the national government's budgets. So there is no long-term commitment from the government side to the funding through MAL contracts, and this is of course weakening the predictability of the policy instrument from the view of the city regions. Yeah, so this is one of the major hiccups from the government's perspective. Maybe another challenge is that due to this nature of being a letter of intent, it's not the most efficient policy tool for every situation. First of all, there is no well-defined connection between the city regional plans and the MAL contracts, which means that the MAL contracts and the city regional plans, they can take the development bit to different directions. So there is a weak link, to a certain extent, bit of a weak link between these two instruments, which should be tied well together. And then secondly, there are no sanctions for non-implementations of the agreements because they are not juridic agreements. So, for example, because of this reason, the municipalities of the city regions don't need to always do what has been agreed on the MAL agreements. For example, in the Helsinki city region, there has been really difficult situation with building the train depots for the city region, that the sustainable transport system of the city regions would urgently need, but the municipalities are not just taking action in terms of planning and building this, although it has been on the MAL contracts for a few contract rounds now. And the same goes with truck parking areas. So these difficult city regional issues that no one really wants to have in the local or the area of their municipality, because it's not bringing them any benefits. So it's really hard to solve with this city regional planning and with the contracts. And of course, it's also not the right instrument for solving some difficult issues for the national government. One of the government sides from the difficult aspects is that the government is not one single organization, but there are different government agencies which the ministries which goals and instruments are always not aligning. And although there has been these actions in the MAL agreements that the government would transfer, for example, some land ownership in the areas which would be good for urban development in the city regions, this has not really progressed at all because of the issues on the government side. So there are these issues with the non-implementation from both sides, and also from the government side. Of course, the funding, they have only agreed that they will provide funding, but sometimes this is not also progressing with the time, because it's tied to the government budgets in each year. So as a conclusion, it could be said that these city regional planning and the MAL agreements are very effective when there can be found win-win solutions between the municipalities or between the municipalities and the national government. But under these harder issues, it's not always the most influential policy mechanism. And this was everything from my side. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kaisa, with those practical examples. We've actually reached the end point of the seminar time-wise, but I hope that you can be able to save some time and stick around at least until 11. Then we can discuss the issues that has arisen during this presentations. If you have to go, I'm very glad that we have Victor and Joachim here from Bouvier that's going to help us to summarize this event. And you will get, if you have to go now, you will get some documentations about what we can learn from this seminar later. So, but hopefully you can stick around. Good. We had to skip the break. I hope that's okay too. If you need to just run out, you can do that. But we'll start by answering some of these questions that have been raised in the chat. But I also invited Lisa Lund from Norrbotten to participate in the panel discussion. So I would like to start to ask you about what are your thoughts when you hear these Finnish examples, both the policies and the examples. Do you recognize yourself from your work in Norrbotten?
Thank you. Hi, Lisa Lund. I'm in Region Norrbotten as a strategist in regional development and regional planning. I went into this thinking that, in Finland, having that system must be so much easier because they have like a recipe and a way to do things. And now I'm thinking maybe it's not all that much easier, but it does appeal to me in the situation we are in Sweden to actually have a recipe of what to do as the regional council when it comes to territorial aspects. So thank you. It's been really interesting. I thought maybe I'm not going to say any more because we're short of time, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And what challenges would you say? Can you recognize when Ilona presented the challenges for Uusimaa? Can you recognize some of those in your practice?
Absolutely. As noted before, the municipalities in Norrbotten are really, really large, and the region is super large. But the challenges that we face, intense pressure from industrial transition and surprisingly many land use conflicts between industry, nature, and reindeer herding and outdoor life. It needs some sort of regional overview that is difficult to produce now on short notice when we were not prepared as a region for those using those tools. So yeah, I do recognize something. I was sitting here thinking, oh, I'm going to try that, and oh, I'm going to call that one. So
sounds good. And Ilona, I think we've got a question that may be interesting for you to answer from Jessica from Trafikverket. Jessica, are you with us still?
Yes, I'm here.
Yeah, the first question you wrote in the chat about the pros and cons. Would you like to state that question?
We've been elaborating on this a bit earlier, and hi Ilona and the Finnish team. Thanks very much for deep insights and very interesting presentations. No, I'm just interesting to get a bit more pros and cons on this legally binding regional plan. Because there was another slide and you showed so many, so I don't remember in which, but lack of implementation means, and I know in Europe, Sweden is quite unique with not having so much legally binding planning. We have this consensus and dialogue process in order to come to implementation and to really get stuff going. So I was more curious about if you have some more reflections on what the legally binding pros could be. Sometimes it scares people and actors off with legally binding means. Have you evaluated this in some way?
Yes, Ilona, would you like to answer that?
Yes, hello Jessica and other Swedish colleagues. Really nice to be in the same virtual floor again. Very good question, and actually we haven't really much evaluated that because it has been a kind of since 1959, so it has been a kind of natural way how we do. So we have this legally binding both regional plan and also the municipality plans mostly. So, but really good question, and actually now when we have this kind of revision of this our land use act, I mean the legislation in the national level. So actually this kind of question has been under hiding there. So actually, do we really need legally binding regional plans? And now it seems that we are not totally revisioning the planning system in Finland so that we will still have legally binding regional plans as well. But the kind of goal of government has been that we should somehow making it a little bit weaker, this kind of legally binding steering of the regional plans. And we see, of course, well, we are the regional planners here, so we see a lot of risks there. And definitely at the moment when we have the climate change and the kind of biodiversity loss, so we see that the regional level legally binding plan has a really strong effect on these goals. And we are afraid that if we are losing the kind of power to steer, for instance, the ecological connections in the regional level, so that will mean that they will be weakening as well. So this is the kind of risk we see. Of course, there are other risks as well. For instance, if we are talking about transportation, so in the regional plan, so we are showing the kind of general way, the kind of alignments of national interests. I mean, the big rail connections, for instance. And we have the kind of situation here, for instance, in our region, that we have the kind of lines between certain regions and also inter state connection, as we have the Tallinn Tunnel, so we have the connection from EU rail network to Finland through Helsinki-Uusimaa region. And there we have the kind of competitive alignments. So certain municipalities in our region, they would like to have on their area this kind of international nice rail connection to get more power and money to their area. And for instance, well, we have another examples as well along the, for instance, the kind of, we call it light rail, which goes straight to the airport. So we have there municipalities that would like to have the rail step or stop in their own city centers. And of course, there is a big challenge between the kind of or paradox or yes, between the kind of international, national and regional goals and the local ones. So there we really, I think we need legally binding regional plan to show the kind of, for instance, the ecological connections or this kind of international or national rail lines. Just some examples. Thanks for a good question.
Thank you, Ilona, for that. I think we're running out of time again, and this has been so interesting, and I wish we had taken 3 hours in account for this, because we could continue to talk about this 1 more hour. But maybe we can meet again in this forum and talk about this and learn more from our different countries. Peter, can you give us a very short reflection on our Finnish colleagues as a ending remark?
Yeah, well, first of all, many thanks for these deep insights into Finnish regional spatial planning. I've learned a lot. It seems to be quite complex. It seems as well for me it's a quite lively regional planning culture in Finland, and therefore I think very interesting for us here from a Swedish perspective. But I would also like to emphasize, for me it seems that since there are so many sort of different policy tools, approaches, well, there's sort of I think a sort of more understanding than here that classical regional planning and regional development should be integrated, much more. And I think these different instruments that you've introduced to us are quite helpful. I mean, Mr. Maul, I think, is interesting, as you were saying as well, Kaisa, that it has as well forced, to some extent at least, intermunicipal cooperation. So that's as well a form of regional planning, if you may say so. And therefore, I think we can learn a lot from that, really to sort of believe in this integrative, comprehensive planning tradition that we normally Sweden and Finland are assigned to. But due to this sort of institutional and practical divide in Sweden of regional development on the one hand, and regional planning in a more classical sense. On the other hand, I think we have lost that a little bit, or maybe at the region level we never have really had it, except maybe Stockholm region and maybe in the future maybe as well Skåne and Halland to some extent. So I think that's really interesting for us to keep in mind. To look more carefully into that and maybe rethink as well our policy tools and approaches a bit more at the regional level and take it more seriously, maybe we've done in the past years.
Yeah. Thank you for that comment, Peter, and a reflection. And especially warm thanks to our Finnish friends that you joined us on this seminar. In ESPON, I'm obliged to tell you that you, if you have time, hopefully, you can go and finish a form about what you thought about the seminar and what you learned in slido.com, and the code is ESPON SE, I should say. And I can also send out this in an email afterwards. And also for I think also for the next kind of seminar in regional development, we need some more suggestions on what you'd like to talk about. So in the same ment as before, I see that the code is also wrong again. Maybe we can post the code in the chat once more. Just let us know what you want to discuss in this kind of forum, the regional room, the regionala rummet, in this the next events that we're going to share together. And with that said, thank you for joining today, and have a good summer if we don't meet each other before. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks very much for having us.
Bye-bye.
Very interesting.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.